One of the things that we've talked about usually centered around sacrifice as a leader. As someone who is in charge of 700 people, what does that look like?
When you choose to be a leader, especially a servant leader, you tend to put others before self. Sacrifice is a lot different than suffering, but sacrifice is the cost of pursuing and achieving excellence.
You shared about your medical emergency that you had. I would love for you to share more.
I was in the gym and I had finished a run, went up to do some weighted kind of bench presses, and all of a sudden I just lost all sensation. The room started spinning. By the time EMS got there, they asked enough questions and the left side of my body just had stopped responding. They're like, we need to get you to the hospital. There was a nurse there who knew the protocol and they called code stroke. And I remember that language so clearly. In that moment, I think I may not walk out of this hospital. This idea that mental health, emotional health, and physical health is separated from good leadership is a fallacy. And it's in fact negligent. It's harmful to try to separate the two. I just wanted to be healed. I wanted to hurry up and get back to be Meredith. And Meredith was gone.
Thank you so much for being here again, Meredith. I know, I've had you here, obviously, and we've had multiple conversations over the years. But for those that don't know who you are, like, how would you go about introducing yourself? And then also, what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Merideth Rose. I'm the proud president and CEO of Cornerstones of Care. We're a 156-year-old behavioral health nonprofit organization in Kansas City, and so we help children and families heal and recover from trauma. I would say I would introduce myself as a change agent, a strong believer and convener of caring communities, a healer of children and families. And today, I would call myself whole, a whole person.
Wow, I love that, whole. And for those that don't know, we've actually had you on this podcast before when it was audio only, and I want to talk about something specific. I know which you actually referenced here. You said healing, and one of the things that we've talked about most of the time usually centered around just sacrifice as a leader. Yeah. And I know you've done your share part of sacrificing. And as a leader, how does that cost, or how much does that cost personally, and then also on a professional level?
Leadership, I think, is synonymous with sacrifice. Today, I would say that sacrifice is a lot different than suffering, but sacrifice is the cost of pursuing and achieving excellence. When you choose to be a leader, especially a servant leader, you tend to put others before self.
Right.
And what I have learned in the past year since I was last here is that is a comprehensive way of being all the time. I don't turn it off. And so in leadership, I think you have to be prepared to think of self alongside what's best for your end community, whoever that might be, your end client. So for me, it's children and families. It's more than 700 employees. This year, it's the sustainability and the continuity of my organization that has been around for nearly 200 years. And in the dynamic and environment that we're in now, it's less about what I want and more what's best for the organization. So to me, you have to be, as a leader, prepared for almost a lessening of self, not in a way that you are diminishing self or decreasing self, but you are thinking about self secondary to others and the benefit of others. And that takes years and sometimes crises and events to be able to really land that thought process. Leadership many times is selfless.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, that's a different definition, like sacrifice. I had a completely different idea when I hear the word sacrifice. I'm thinking, you are giving up something in order for something else to happen. But you've completely changed that.
Well, and even giving up is not a bad thing. Giving up could mean not now, not yet,
right,
not at this moment, not more importantly or before this. And what it does, I think, is it broadens your ability to think thoughtfully and intentionally and strategically about a leader.
Mm-hmm.
As a young person, I think last time I talked to you, I was in emergency management. So everything I did was very reactive and responsive.
Right.
I wouldn't call myself a sacrificial leader. I
Right.
was a doer, producer, get it done. I was an executor. But when you're talking about human beings and you're talking about child and family welfare, you're talking about the safety and the healing of lives, that means take a
Taking it
minute,
slow.
step back.
Mm-hmm.
What perhaps needs to be put on the shelf because there are other more important priorities. So sacrifice in and of itself is not a bad thing. It could
Mm-hmm.
just mean sequencing and timing needs to
Right.
be shuffled around a bit.
Yeah. Wow. And like one of the things that came up, especially all the conversations that I had in season one, it was around the cost.
Yeah.
You know, for example, Paul Kempinski, I actually had him during season one, and like one of the things that he shared was back when he was, you know, the CEO at Children at Mercy. One of his main problems was that he wanted to do everything.
I can relate.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, he had one project happening, and that was another one on you know, on the wraps, and he had a lot of issues just internally. And I wanted to know, as someone who is now in charge of 700 people,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
I think this year in particular, and that's such a great question, and I can relate with Paul, because one of the first things I said when I joined the organization nearly 4 years ago now is, before we do more of more, we're going to do more of well. And I said we were going to go slow. We weren't going to grow and scale and expand. But
Mm-hmm.
what we find in this business of mental health and unmet needs for children and families, that sometimes the business and the need increases and it follows you. And so for us, I think this year, more importantly, we are trying to think about, what do we at Cornerstones of Care do alone, do exclusively, and do exceptionally well. And that might mean sharpening our focus, not
Right.
necessarily shrinking our footprint or our number of programs and services, but before we consider moving or expanding or going to the next thing,
Mhm.
let's be real clear about our data and our storyline of what we do right now. And that is hard for leaders and organizations, especially businesses, because one of the main target lines is you have to stay relevant. You have
Right.
to keep reinventing yourself. But here's the thing, I think good leadership sacrifice is saying, before I go chase the profit or the bottom line,
Mhm.
I'm going to pursue excellence in this craft, in this trade, and in this work. And that is the harder discipline, I think, for a good leader. My personal life, my personal health has taught me the value, though, of that disciplined exercise. But before I go chase that shiny thing,
Mhm.
even if it would be for the good of my organization and our financial sustainability, I need to be real clear. Does it align with what I do? Do I have the capacity to sustain it? Am I
Mhm.
supporting and helping my team through
Right.
it? And if I can't answer affirmative with all of those things, I should really think twice before I chase the next carrot.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's I'm actually struggling with that right now. So I'm going to ask you a personal, my own,
Yeah.
you know, experience. You know, I find myself in a situation where I am, you know, responsible, or just, you know, in charge of being clear with people that I work with, and people that I have to serve,
Yeah.
and then people that I have to deliver. So I want to know, in your own situation, when it comes to your employees, the board, you know, your like executive team, how do you go about making sure that they're all aligned? Especially when now your focus is on slowing down. And sometimes you can have those execs who are like, hey, let's go.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
the finances, we have the capacity, but obviously they don't see the entirety of like when it comes to capacity.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're wanting to accomplish something, but you as the main leader are like, okay, let's just take it slow.
Yeah.
How do you make sure you can align all those responsibilities?
That's a great question. A theme for my life, especially now in 2026, is clarity is kindness to your teams. And sometimes when we think about entering into something or elevating something or stretching something, we have very immediate, responsive, and sometimes short time thinking.
Right.
I always like to think 5 years from now, 2 years from now, 2 months from now, if I were to work myself backwards
Mhm.
in state, is this performing like I would expect it to? Do I have enough energy and support with the board or with the team to sustain it? In our work, a lot of what we do is outside of our control. So, for example, a large stream of our funding is longer term government state contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in 4 years, administration and priorities could change.
Right.
So, it's really prudent for me before I chase another thing. I need to ask a series of questions about financial impact, sustainability, impact to teams, impact to families, especially in this work about communities and families. Sometimes we can do more harm standing something up and saying, here's a great new initiative or project, even if it has good outcomes and goals. But if we can't promise it'll be around 10 years from now, all we've done is perpetuate harm in that community and for those people. So it is this holistic kind of 360 thinking that is really difficult. And I'll tell you, it's easy for me to say this is the framework in which I use. I've been on the other end where I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's call so-and-so. Let's get to it. But you've got to surround yourself with people who will really kind of check your thinking, really help you walk through the rubric and the matrix of, is this mission aligned? Is this sustainable? Is this financially viable? Can we tell a story about this? And does it perpetuate our commitment to not do any harm? So I try to walk my team through these lenses of thinking and thought process before we really make any significant milestone movements. And I think the last thing I would say is just on that day-to-day operation, supporting those folks to make sure you've got to be clear with expectations and capacity. I know we'll get into it, but after I suffered a medical emergency last year, I had to be really clear with my board about what I could and could not do. I couldn't work past a certain time of the day. And I saw them respond. They met that courageously, and they gave me the space that I needed to be effective. So be clear with your folks about what they can expect and what your true capacity is, wherever you are. So.
Oh yeah, it is very important. You know, especially me, you know, as someone who is, you know, I am very similar to Paul as well. I like to do 10 other things at the same time. And this year has always, you know, I've set out goals where I'm going to make sure that I'm taking things slow and not rushing. You know, that's why the whole rebranding of the podcast was very important, because I had to let go of so many other things just so that I can focus on this. And then you like touched on something. You said harm. And I want to understand, like, in your business, like, how do you go about explaining the business aspect of what you do? And when I say what you do, I mean the organization as a whole, because we're in a very interesting time right now. And you mentioned community as well. And I know communities now, you know, there has been a very interesting shift in like energy and focus lately. And as someone who is leading an organization where children are involved and you're helping children, nowadays I'm seeing a very interesting shift across communities where it's becoming really hard to help people because there's so much, you know, distrust in general. And I wanted to get your take on that. Like, how do you go about navigating, you know, that, you know, picture that I just painted, and how do you avoid the harm?
That's such a good question. People, their stories, their communities, their cultures, they're very fragile right now for many reasons, and some very justified. You know, everything that we do has to intersect a point of safety, of health, and trust. And so I think the way we've navigated that and positioned ourselves is we want to be a trusted agent, a trusted voice, a trusted conduit for healing. And to do that, we have to do both and so this is what I mean. You know, we have systems and programs to respond to the crisis, to help heal the bleed or the broken, whether it's supporting a youth who needs to come out of the home for a period of time and go have a stay at a residential center so they can stabilize behaviors and get therapeutic counseling. We have programs, foster care, who receive children who can't belong safely or stay safely at home. The goal is always to get them reunified with family and permanently housed. Where I find us being a difference maker is at the early onset when something starts to break, before families become dismantled, before the crisis becomes something that we can't walk back. You hear a lot about social determinants of health and high crime rates and the numbers in the correction system. I like to tell people, if we would follow the breadcrumbs back to those outcomes, I bet you would find trauma at the beginning. So where I really want to leverage our 156-year-old history and skill set and just impassioned, courageous must do. It is going to do life alongside children and families as they are doing life, as breaking is starting to break, so that we can wrap around them, give them new tools, give them new language, new support, and a new pathway, something different before we get too far down the line of total disruption. And I think that's how you create safety with communities who have lost trust in systems. There's a great saying that says, don't plan about me without me. I need to be a part of my solution. It's called strength-based for a reason. Stop talking about my deficits and help me see my assets. Help me understand that this season of broken is just temporary in my life. And so it's about where leaders and these organizations position themselves in the journey. And so many times we're the safety net to catch things when they fall, but wouldn't it be great if we got further upstream? And so that's the whole courageous, I think, must do for our team this year and going forward. And how I want us to be distinguished is we will not wait until what's breaking becomes totally broken.
Right. No, very important. And like another side of the harm that I see is usually like an internal thing, where sometimes, for example, boards don't align. And then you have the leadership team is also struggling seeing things the same way. So, which, tells me there's a cultural problem. How do you go about navigating that if you find yourself in this situation? And when I ask you this question, is because I did. And I'm just trying to understand how other people go about it.
I think sometimes we think that culture and climate, which are very interconnected, but they're distinctly different. So culture for us is your identity. It is the values. It is the behaviors. It's the things that can be seen and felt. Climate is how it feels within that culture. It's that mood. And so without attending to constantly that culture and climate, what you see it dissipating. You see that foundation that should be the bedrock of everything that any business or organization does. You see it eroding because we've lost track of creating it as an important operational priority, just like making money is, just like scaling programs is. So how I think our team has really tried to wrangle culture and climate is we are very open and honest and real about our data and who we are. Every organization, we do annual experience surveys, but we try to take that information and data and create actionable strategies. And we don't develop them from the board and the executive leadership team on down. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has input. Everybody has eyes on it. As you can imagine, for a team of 700, that's really hard because you've got the operations and the crisis that's constantly going. And then you have this subsequent, but still very important priority to attend to culture. So I'll be honest, we struggle with it. I've seen in the last 3.5 years, our data kind of go like this. One thing I'm most proud of, I will say, is, and I think I told you before, we are certified in the Sanctuary Model of Trauma Responsive Care. It is the unified and unifying framework that guides everything that we do. So whether you're working with our team in Independence, Kansas, or our team in Grandview, Missouri, you see a consistency in culture and climate and service delivery because Sanctuary is what binds us. So I think there needs to be a shared collective strategy. I think there needs to be good understanding and accountability with the data, even if it's ugly. But then it has to be like breathing. It has to be a way of operationalizing the data into action, and not a training, not a you must do, not a mandate. It is what creates that energy and that synergy that it is great to work here. It's safe to work here. So people have to be responsive to their data. They have to be okay with their data. But they have to create a system in which it's okay and it's expected that culture and climate is a priority.
Absolutely. So. No, I actually like that. I'm going to steal it. Culture and climate. Just a heads up. If you hear me, I'm going to do my best to give you credit. But if I forget,
no worries. I think I stole it from Dr. Andrea Hendricks from Authentico. So we've retained her as a consultant this year.
Lovely. Well, I need to have her on the podcast.
She's phenomenal. I mean, you really should. But she helped me understand that clarity. So many times companies or leaders, they're attentive to one or the other, but not both. And you can have a great culture, but all of a sudden have this little fire, the climate, the feeling in one of your buildings or teams starts to bubble up. And the next thing you know, it's starting to chip away your culture. So you have to be attentive to both and at the same time.
Huh.
Yeah.
You know, as you were saying that, I actually was watching a comedy show, I think like 3 days ago. I don't remember the comedian's name, but
Yeah.
he was talking about culture, which is
Mm.
interesting.
Yeah.
That now even comedians are talking about it. But
Yeah.
he was coming from a place of race. And then he was like, we don't have a racial problem, we have a cultural problem.
Mm.
And he was like,
Two
America is
snaps for
such
that
a
one.
big country, and then we're so diverse.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're stuck at the racial conversation is because we haven't realized that we all come from different cultures. And when
Yes.
we communicate, sometimes we're offending one another because
Yes.
we're having a clash of cultural
That's right.
ideas, not even the racial stuff. And to me, that kind of blew my head. I was like,
That's
whoa,
brilliant. Yeah.
that's fascinating
Yeah.
because I never actually thought of it like that. I call myself Abraham advocates, you know, and it's funny that I got that from a
Yeah.
comedian.
Yeah.
But like when it comes to, you know, like your leadership, and again, thanks for giving me that insight onto that. Just the cultural climate.
Mhm.
I think that's very beautiful. Just being aware of that.
Yeah.
But another thing that I'm aware of when it comes to leadership, it's sometimes a lot of leaders find themselves in a position where they're not trained. And I know we've had this
Yeah.
conversation before. And I personally, I had a leadership team where I wasn't providing any training, and that's how this discussion became a thing. But as someone who worked in you work in a space where that's a priority, where you guys are constantly training your people, your
Yeah.
employees, your leaders. Who actually is responsible of that to make sure that across the board, you know, like leaders are being trained to make sure that they can even lead the people, their teams,
Yeah.
and not just because I know sometimes we leave everything to HR, which is
Yeah.
adding more problems and more things on their plate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know some companies are creating like chief people officers nowadays,
Mhm.
so now they're delegating the task to them. But
Yeah.
I do want to know who across the organization is responsible of that to make sure that leaders are you know equipped and you know prepared to lead people.
Yeah. So my simple answer is everyone.
Oh no,
Now,
okay.
and it's a twofold answer.
I'm
It starts,
biased because
it's everyone. I tell my team, culture is
Mhm,
everyone's responsibility. Training and development is
mhm,
everyone's responsibility. From the time we start recruiting and then we bring on an employee through new employee orientation,
mhm,
they are experiencing our culture by way of our climate. And
mhm.
so they are observing
Right.
how we set standards, how we respond to difficult questions, how we make judgment calls in the field. So, behaviorally, I think changing and shifting the language that everyone has responsibility for creating a culture that is teachable and that professional development is a core competency. It has to be shared.
Right.
And that starts with me. So, the second part of the answer is even as a leader, I have recognized I have great skills at vision setting and making big frameworks, and just recently noticed in trying to cascade that down beyond my executive leadership team, I may not be the best person to do that delivery.
Mm.
I need to get some development on how to do that well. I used to lead 1,200 people and
Yeah.
disasters. What do you mean I can't communicate clearly? And I think that's because just the work and just the magnitude of things have gotten bigger. So I have made it clear to my team I am creating a training personal goal for myself to get some development in that area.
Right.
So again, it's embedded in leaders. Everybody has responsibility for it. And then operationally, we did parcel off training and professional development from HR. And we have a collaborative and learning department that exclusively, that's all they do. So
Right.
beyond the competency training that they have to provide for families in foster care and some of our program work, they develop competency trainings on every skill you can imagine, from courageous leadership to management effectively,
Mhm.
to how to create an environment that is conducive for feedback. So we are taking the data from our culture assessment, taking the data from performance expectations and performance evaluations, and it's a constant cycle of being aware of what our
Mhm.
people need. And so
Mm.
every year, that team comes up with a new training
Yeah.
regiment and
Mm.
calendar. And it's not just to check the box, it's supposed to be responsive and reflective
Mhm.
to the actual needs of where people are. So even now, 3 years in, we are learning and hearing managers need better training with
Mhm.
how to give effective, hard, courageous feedback to
Right.
individuals. You would think after almost 200 years, we've got that down.
Yeah.
Every year we learn a skill set that we're like,
Mhm.
I thought we conquered this already.
Right.
But to think about turnover, I mean, this work in particular is really hard. Sometimes it's You see secondary and visceral trauma. So the shelf life for employees staying in this type of work is turning over constantly. So we
Right.
have to stay attentive to just the world, the language, the needs, the human needs of employees are very different. So our training has to reflect that and be responsive to that as
Right.
well.
No, yeah, I do like that you guys are not only doing training, but you're also creating a way to like get feedback as well.
Yes.
And I have this funny advice that I like to tell leaders. I'm like, before you get feedback, make sure that you have seen a therapist.
I
Sometimes,
will amen that.
because sometimes you're not ready.
No.
That's how
No.
I actually went to therapy, because I had a, I don't know. I mean, I know who it is, but because it was
And you have a small
anonymous,
fee, right?
but then that's how I went to therapy, because I
Yeah.
was like, wow, okay, this is pretty rough. Let me go. And she literally
Yeah.
concluded, like, I think you should go see a therapist.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, okay. Some
I
people
was
are
not
very
ready
raw.
for my first 360 review until I
Really?
went to see a therapist, because I'm an emotional and emotive leader, and I know that
Right.
about myself, and it's what makes me a strong leader. People say you are an empath through and through,
Mhm.
and yet that's the one thing that I would get feedback and it would just cripple
Yeah.
me.
I know, same here, because I like to think I'm very open and welcoming, and I do right by everybody.
Yes.
But then the first time I got that, I will not remember. It was on a Thursday evening, and I sent out a review to everybody else. I'm like, let me just see what people think, because I'm just talking to myself.
Yeah.
And now we have ChatGPT, so I can talk to ChatGPT. but back then I just received it, and then the first one, and then the second and third, I was like, okay, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Let me just take a break. And it took me a week.
It's a gut check. But when you reach that point where you can take that
Yes.
and you can unpack it and
Mhm.
you realize, first of all, they are thoughtful in thinking of me to even
Mhm.
give me feedback. So many people have choices to not or
Mhm.
to skew it, or but I am grateful for the courage and the thoughtfulness that
Yeah.
it takes for someone to say, I care about you enough and I know you're a good leader. Let me just give you a
Help
couple
you a
of
little bit.
nuggets.
Mhm. So like, how do you make sure that anyone who's receiving that, especially in your organization, because sometimes you may be going to an HR person or someone in people leadership, how do you make sure that they're ready for that? Before, I made a joke about therapy, but therapy is an option.
Yeah.
But as an organization, how do you make sure they don't identify with things that employees are saying, but you
Yeah.
see it as like, oh, this is another angle for me to get better?
Yeah. So I am going to go back to the sanctuary model. It is not for people who just do child and family welfare and mental health work. It has 7 commitments, including growth and change, open communication, transparency, social responsibility, and it has been interwoven into the fabric of how we treat each other and what we do. So people know that social responsibility says, if I care about you as not only my peer and potentially my friend, I want you to be well.
Right.
And that means I have the invitation to have open communication with you about my experience. So a lot of times it's about framing and the language that you use. If I have to have a really difficult conversation with someone, I give them advance notice. I tell them very clearly, I'd like to give you some feedback back about a recent experience. But then I frame that conversation. Here's my goal. I want to tell you about that experience. And when we're done with this conversation, I'd like to offer my support and how we can improve. The idea about sanctuary is that first you establish safety. And as you establish safety, you establish trust. And
Right.
where there is trust, those 7 commitments can flow freely. And so we have found it a great framework to have really difficult conversations about people not performing. And I also tell my team, I want to be able to walk alongside you as you grow and develop. And
Right.
each of us have this innate barometer, if you will, when we know we're doing well, we're off track, or we're not quite cutting it. I want to meet you in that place and have a courageous conversation about what you see in
Right.
your productivity, what I see, and then what we can do from those findings together. People take feedback better when they can take it in the relationship of partnership.
Right.
And I think that's key. So many times supervisors are giving feedback, they're giving them a checklist of things to improve, some trainings to take, and they'll follow up in some weeks. People want partnership when they have to do something really hard. So if a
Right.
supervisor says, I care enough and I'm investing my time, my energy, my check-in, increasing supervisions with you because I want to see you succeed, that's received so much differently. It says, I
Right.
care about you. I want you to be well and I want you to succeed.
Wow, fascinating. Now I want to go into the employee experience now, because this is something that I actually experience from a company that I was, like part of a little bit. I was like one of the co-founders. This was a long time ago back in California. But the guy who actually founded the company and the CEO, I was the CFO. I had no idea what I was doing, but they gave me the CFO title because I went to school for accounting. I was like, cool, I guess I'll figure out the numbers, crunch numbers. But back then, the CEO had a very weird thing with like surveys. Like he wanted us to do the surveys and he would tell me to tell people to do it. And I was like, that's my job. I'll tell people to do it. But then I ended up, like there was a period when no one was getting any like promotion because money was a problem at that time. And then they wanted me to do this survey and I asked them, do we need the survey this year? Because no one is getting anything. He's like, oh, we actually do this as a way to, if we need to fire someone, we can go back. We have history to see what they did wrong.
Oh my.
So how do we make sure that?
Do not recommend.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't there long after that because I was like, I wrote some stuff, on my own response.
I hope he deleted that stuff.
Hopefully he did because it was a long time ago. Maybe he has a shelf life. After 7 years, he would delete. Hopefully, please delete.
Yeah.
But so how do you make sure that there's trust across the employees that are actually doing this survey to make sure that they can go in and write?
Yeah, so your story reminds me that good leadership has to be adaptive. I think sometimes we, I read everything a new CEO should know in 2022 and, really was regimented and structured in setting up my path and my processes through that. But as you learn your people, as you stay open to relationship and you invest time in them and you understand their quirks, their skills, their capabilities, their character, even what rubs them the wrong way.
Right.
There is this misnomer that you can't have standardization if you're going to tailor and customize your approach for every employee, but that's just not true. You can have standard tools like surveys and that kind of thing, but you need to know your audience very well. So if I were that leader in that time period, I probably would have still collected that data, but I wouldn't have done an instrument or a survey. I would have taken them out to lunch, or I would have had a focus group, or I would have had one-to-one meetings.
We've never done any of that.
And that's not a skill set. I can explain. So what I've learned to do, what I'm not really good at is putting a whole bunch of questions together on this really long tool when I know people are, challenged or an environment is stressful or they're not getting raises. So my skill set and gift is how do I try to get end goal completed in terms of getting this data and surveying people, but how am I also being responsive, humane, and empathic with how I'm engaging with them? Because here's the key. Not only is that survey a great tool to build trust, so is that engagement. The methodology and how they got that information is a trust builder or a trust breaker. So you can lose employees by trying to help them and get data just by how you decided to execute, that connection. So every touch point with an employee, even if it's an instrument or electronic, every one matters and could work to your advantage or to your disadvantage.
Right.
So.
No, yeah, I'm gonna take credit for the employees doing the survey because I was the mouthpiece. I would go and tell them.
He told you to do it.
In my head, I'm thinking this is to make sure you get a raise someday. So I kind of convinced them to do because I'm the CFO.
Okay, so here's a good point about that. I have created an environment with my C-suite team. Like, don't let me walk into a pitfall or a trap. If I'm thinking a strategy or an idea is really good for a team, I need you to gut check. And if something's like, this is not going to go over well, Meredith, I have empowered all of my leaders. Come tell me, because what's more important to me, we can still talk about how to get to my end goal. But in that situation, I would have hoped you would say, you know what? I don't know that this is a good idea.
Right.
And, if you've not built a trust relationship and a rapport with your manager, they may not give you that kind of visceral feedback. So I have tried to create an environment all through the organization at every level, from frontline staff all the way to governing board, that if we need to get in sanctuary and have a really courageous conversation, we can't improve or fix anything we don't know about. And so everybody is empowered with voice. That's just so important for our work at Cornerstones of Care.
Right. No, I mean, I see it every day. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have it on a podcast again, because I was like, we need to continue this conversation because we ran out of time the last time.
Yeah.
I do want to go back to just what you said earlier. You shared about just like your medical
Yeah.
emergency that you had and your board. You had to talk to them and then actually have them work with you. That's not very common.
Yeah.
I had a friend CEO. I'm not going to say who because it's Kansas City, and he told me not to say.
Small world.
He's like, "Don't go on your podcast, Abraham. This is personal." He's like, "You can walk around it, but don't say my name or the company name. I sign this amount of papers." But he's going to be on his podcast, and he will whenever that lapse to come back and share. But basically, he found himself in a similar situation, and he had to step down, and he felt like he wasn't done, and he wanted to keep going, but the fact that happened to him, which he's not very happy about. And I remember having a conversation with him to like help him chill a little bit.
Yeah.
But we've had a similar conversation, as well. And I remember back then, just talking to you and then hearing you talk, there was so much acceptance. And I want to understand first, if you're open to it, I would love for you to share more about the emergency, and then I want to understand, how did you find peace through all of that?
I've prepared for this. So 4 months to the day tomorrow, September 15th, 2025, I had a stroke. I have always been an athlete. I was an athlete in high school and college and in relatively good health. I, at that time, was probably running 3 miles 3 days a week. And so I was in the gym and I had finished a run, went up to do some weighted kind of bench presses. And all of a sudden, I just lost all sensation. The room started spinning and I knew my eyes were literally spinning. And so I just tried to compose myself and just never returned. I remember I called my husband. I said, "I think you need to come up to Planet Fitness." I overdid it. I always fast when I work out. So I thought maybe it's just electrolytes or something are out of balance. And I just couldn't get the room to stop spinning. And by the time he got there, it just took a couple of minutes. I lost the ability to speak clearly. And then all of a sudden I just got really sleepy and I just wanted to go to sleep. And I remember him calling EMS, and both of us at the time are still thinking, "Oh, you just overdid it." But by the time EMS got there, they asked enough questions, and the left side of my body just had stopped responding. They're like, "We need to get you to the hospital." Still at this point, I think I'm fine. 5 minutes later, I'm at the hospital, and I remember I went to say something, and it was kind of transposed. It was inverted, and there was a nurse there who knew the protocol, and they called code stroke. And I remember that language so clearly. My whole present state of mind shifted from there. It became, I'm 44 years old. I'm very athletic. I'm very healthy. I'm a mom of 10 children and 4 grandchildren and 1 on the way, and I'm having a stroke. And then all of a sudden, this thought process that I'm this exceptional leader and all these things that I've accomplished, like none of that matters. In that moment, I think I may not walk out of this hospital. And I've heard stories like this. And then my mind goes to, well, God, like I've survived abuse and domestic violence and adoption and foster care. Like, surely this is not another thing, because I thought we were good. Like, right. You sent me to this place. Like, your mind, especially when you're a leader, when you're in the state of crisis, it goes to so many places. And then it all became about, okay, this is real. It's happening. I remember my husband grabbed my face. And what they told me is that they said, "Merideth, you are having a stroke." And I was still in denial. I was like, "I'm not having a stroke. Just give me a minute." And I'm just talking. And he grabs my face and he said, "You have a 4-hour window to get this kind of stroke blocker, this medicine. And if you don't get it, everything that is progressing is going to continue and you will never regain." So by this time, I'm not speaking. I can't see. My face is looking different. And in that moment, when my husband says, "We're going to pray, they're offering you this medicine, we're going to take it. This is your emergency right now," is what he said. And all of the other thoughts about not being ready and what I've done up to this point and so much to do, they just go out the window. For the next 3 days, I'm in the ICU at 44 years old. I'm in the ICU. And only because of God's healing and grace. What's so interesting is I see all these specialists, I see neurologists come in. By day 4, I'm walking. By day 4, I've regained about 85% of my movement. I'm walking with a walker, and I'm walking around the unit, and I see people intubated, and I see people my age and older, and there is this washing over me to say, you are a miracle. We still don't know why and how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
We walk through the scans. There's no evidence that I had a stroke. Thank God we took the stroke blocker, and I was able to, whatever happened, stop happening. And even the neurologist said, I've just never seen anything like this. And I don't know why it happened. I don't know how it happened. And I don't know how you're walking. So I go back home, and to make a long story short, what happens in the next couple of months is just this significant mindset shift. My body had literally been broken.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I knew I was a miracle and what I had survived was miraculous, I didn't feel like myself. Within a week, I'm like, there's no way I can go back to leading a team of 700. And I remember leaving a voice memo for my best friend, and I'm just in tears, and I'm crying out. I'm crying out to her. I'm crying out to God. I'm just crying out to understand, like, why did you bring me here to have such great responsibility, and now I have nothing? So what I have concluded, is that there's just this opportunity in crisis that leaders will face, whether they're spiritual or not, where you get to figure out what is most important in your life. This idea that mental health, emotional health, and physical health is separated from good leadership is a fallacy. And it's, in fact, negligent. It's harmful to try to separate the two. But the last thing I will say is I just wanted to be healed. I wanted to hurry up and get back to being Merideth. And Merideth was gone. To this day, I struggle to say a sentence without overthinking it. I take notes and read from scripts with my team, whereas I was able to just ad-lib and talk freely. Thoughts are really hard. Conversations like these, I'll take the next 4 hours just to recover. And what God really spoke to me in that moment and in those 3 months was, I don't want you to be the same. Mm-hmm. I want you to understand the miracle of life, of time, of opportunity. And while everybody chases healing, what I want you to be is whole. I want you to stop running to the gym to find your strength in Planet Fitness and being able to run a 6-minute mile. And that's not your strength. I want you to stop relying on your ability to communicate clearly, to tell an impassioned story. You've survived, you've lived through things, and I'm going to bring people and resources. So it was about less of me, more of him, and understanding just the humanity that needs to thrive in good leadership. It's not the striving, it's not the doing, it's not the finances. All those are important. But if you are not whole as a leader, eventually you will break and you'll not be able to recover. So that's the journey. That's the story.
Man, that's fascinating and so powerful. And everything that you went through to have that much trust. It's and like earlier today, I heard, I believe he's a representative at Texas. His name is something Talarico. He's like really, really, really suave guy. He's really good.
With a name like that,
he's a very great communicator. But he was talking about fate. And I don't know why I saw this video this morning, but he was talking about how there's a misconception when people hear fate. And that's why we're in such a weird time right now. It's because people hear fate and they think they have to believe. And so when they put their faith in anything or anyone, they go all in. Sometimes they lose themselves through that process. And then he was like, but there's another definition that we don't talk about enough when you hear fate. And he said, and that definition is trust. And it's like, you should not follow someone and just follow them blindly and have no idea and not question them whatsoever. I said, when you find yourself in that position, you are in belief with this individual. And I hear you speak right now. Normally when people go through something like that, fate sometimes is no longer there. It usually comes off as anger. And I want to understand, like, what helped you. I know you mentioned your best friend, your husband, but I know it's deeper than that. There has to be something where you felt like being this vulnerable is important. And what trust or fate is leading you into that discovery right now?
In courage, I'm just going to have to say, and I unapologetically, my life exists so that people know the strength, the saving power of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is, that fuels me, that fills me. He has proven time and time again in seasons and accidents and emergencies where by science, by data, by life, I should have never walked away.
Right.
And the moment I gave my life to say, everything that I'm going to do and live and lead, I do that through the power of the cross and what Jesus did for me. Things haven't been easy, but he's never disappointed. And so what I've learned about faith is there is an actual absolute breaking that happens, and that's okay. And I love the Lord and his goodness so much that he meets you in that breaking. And I remember having conversations or just writing, like, I don't know what you're doing, but I know you have me here for a reason. I know your Bible says, your word says that you will never leave nor forsake me. I know it says that when I am weak, you are strong. Right. So what I would do is I would write those, and they are all over my wall. They're the first thing I look at after I wake up from my bed. They're all in my office. And so when day by day, instead of getting better, I was regressing, my faith in Christ and what he was able to do on the cross and what I know he will do for me was the only thing that kept me going.
Right.
And the reason why I say it's important to hold that space in Jesus for me is I've tried everything else. I've tried meditation. I've tried spiritual things. And it's always about the power dynamic. The relationship has been what I do to try to ascribe to be closer to this thing, to be like God. It's the one and only story that I believe to be true where Jesus came down and he did it all for me. And all I have to do is say yes and surrender and give myself. So literally after that stroke, I had nothing. I had no cognitive ability. I had no good speech. I had good friends, but they could only do so much. And so I literally said, Lord, here I am.
Right.
Whatever this is going to be, let it be. And there's a scripture in Daniel that I love from the biblical story, that, the three gentlemen, they were being threatened to be thrown into the lion's den if they didn't worship another God. And they said, so be it. If we get devoured, so be it. But if not, God is still good. Right. And so my philosophy and my belief has been, I'm probably never going to be the 100% that I was before September 15th. And yet I'm still breathing. And yet daily I'm still a gift. And yet daily I have 5 grandchildren now. And, there's just so much goodness I see. And I can only attribute that to the goodness of God. So for others, and I receive that and I welcome that. For me, Jesus has proven himself time and time again. Right. And until the day I die, that will be where my faith and my trust lives and dwells.
Beautiful. Wow. Again, thank you so much for being so, open and just so vulnerable to just talk about just your experience in general. And I remember, I think I sent you this, but I was reading a book titled "Your Body Keeps a Score." Yeah. Beautiful book, by the way. It's and one of the things that I got from the book, because I also had Bell palsy, where half of my face went paralyzed. Mine was due to stress. In my early days of an entrepreneur, I felt like it was important to stay up to 3 a.m. drinking coffee and just keep typing away.
We all think we can do that.
Because I'm an entrepreneur. We got to hustle hard.
Who told us those lies?
Man, we just pick it along the way and we just make it our own defective identity. It's so interesting.
Oh, that's good.
But I went through that and it took me so long to even understand. So I also now walk my life and then always remember, a quote that I saw just weirdly while I was at the hospital, and then it was on the wall and it says, guard your heart for everything flows from it.
Ooh, that's Bible. My grandmother was like,
I was like, that's so, I was going to get a tattoo, but I don't like tattoos.
And that would be a really long tattoo.
Yeah, I know, right? So I just now remind myself when I, even down to this podcast, the reason why I created it is to, help people understand that you can build all of this, but if you lose yourself in the process, it gets really challenging and very lonely. And you are making it easy for a lot of people to be able to identify that and be like, oh, I'm not this thing that I'm building. I am more than that.
That's right.
This is something that I happen to do right now, and it's fun, but it's not rooted in my identity.
That's right.
And again, thank you for being able to outline that so beautifully in your own experience. I do want to know, like, why are you still going after everything that happened?
This is going to be a vulnerable moment. I think I've cried at least 4 times, and we're only in the second week of January.
Right.
It's hard. It is absolutely hard because I no longer have devices that I used to rely on. That I knew it's like foot goes forward and we're moving.
Right.
I don't have that certainty with all of my things anymore. I think it is less about, and I don't want to seem insensitive when I say this, God is going to do the great thing that he plans to do with and for Cornerstones of Care, with or without me.
Right.
I have just been a cog and a part and a shepherd in this season who is moving it forward. But I think he wants me to follow through on this idea of less of self, more of him, and more trust. Less of trying to be superhuman, superhero, and being vulnerable, open, and honest for every other human, even if they never get to relationship with Jesus, to say, you have a capacity, you have a limit, and as a human being, you have a time clock.
Right.
Choose wisely of how you are using your machine and your heart, your brain every single day. I love the name of your podcast. You got to know. I did not know well. Right. I did not know well at all. Everything was yes. Because somewhere, someone told me that if I didn't say yes, I wouldn't be accepted. I wouldn't be of value. They wouldn't like me anymore. They wouldn't choose me next time. I put my body and my brain on the line to be everything to all people.
Right.
And that left, my husband always says, don't give the world your best and give your family what's left.
Right.
And I was swinging towards that end of the spectrum. So I do this because God has given me breath in my lungs. And I told him, as long as I have breath in my lungs, I will work to try and heal and restore what's broken, whether that be children or families, communities, or systems. I'm going to give my life to that until I am called home. But I think the second thing is, this is really hard. And we don't quit hard things. We find space and capacity to heal from them. We have outlets. We talk about them, because I guarantee you, where there's one of me, there's 500, 5,000, 5 million.
Indeed.
And my prayer is that this reaches who it needs to reach in this season. I'm not going to pat you on the back because you're just pushing through the brick wall. I want you to stop and ask yourself about the voice that's telling you to walk through the brick wall. Do the heart work. You said everything flows through the heart. Each of us have narratives and stories and voices and experiences that have shaped who we are and how we feel about ourselves, and the stories or the lies we tell about ourselves.
Right.
Do that work, because eventually you're going to run into an event, whether it's a crisis, a stress at work, something. And if you haven't done that heart work, you will crumble.
Right.
I think that's why you see the mental health crises and the suicide rates the way they are, is because people are walking around with broken hearts and trying to pretend like they're okay. So that's why I want to... Listen, I've cried 3 times, and it's only the second week of 2026.
Right.
Like, you say it takes courage. I say it is the must do.
Yeah.
Like, I was saved for that reason, to tell people to stop doing that and go do the heart work. Get yourself whole.
Indeed.
Healing is good. You can bandage up almost any kind of physical injury, but if you don't do the heart work, you're just repeating and rewrapping broken.
Wow, man, that's really powerful. And I wasn't going to ask you this, but now I want to hear your take, just from your perspective. I feel like you would bring a different perspective to it in general.
Yeah.
But this question came about from all the conversations that I had in season 1, which is, now I call them the 4C, because people kept adding more C. It may even be 5 Cs now, because there's a newer one that just happened when I, had the roundtable discussion here. So basically, the idea of these 4 Cs is designed for individuals to navigate conflict, because conflict will always happen. Like, we're always going to be dealing with conflict, either on a personal level, professional level. You could be walking out right now and have conflict with someone, but how do you make sure that the conflict doesn't become crisis? And based off the conversations that I've had, a lot of leaders lean on clarity, which you've touched on, and they also make sure they're communicating as effectively as possible, and then also that they have the capacity for that conflict to even before going into crisis. But the goal is to not make sure you don't find yourself in crisis. Yeah. And I want to get your take. I guess now it's 5 C's actually. So, we can start with clarity, communication, capacity, and crisis. But the goal is to how do you deal with conflict?
We've established clear is
Mhm.
kind. And communication is hard. I've always avoided hard conversations as a child, but I think what the stroke taught me is, what would I do in the absence of communication? I have a gift and I have an opportunity to be very clear with people that I care about and that I love. And so I love that. Give me the third one again.
Sorry. So the third one is capacity. It's too many C's, man.
I love it. So capacity. I mean, the
Yeah,
physical
we've touched on
story,
that. Yes.
I think is huge. Crisis is the last one.
Yeah.
A little bit of crisis, I think, is healthy for everybody. And not that you go looking for it, but I think if you don't, you'll probably never be able to master those preceding C's, but you need a good ability to go through, recover, and learn from each of those so that you are ready for crisis when it comes. I think nothing in this human life is without crisis.
Right.
And if you lead an organization, whether it's a team of 3 or a team of 30,000, inevitably you're going to face some crisis. So, I think my perspective is don't think of it as an unnecessary or an unfortunate evil. Think of it as the reality of human life, a part of business, a part of systems growth. It is present in every state of humanity and running organizations. But I think you prepare for it by making sure that you are working through each of those C's and in a reflective mindset. And you should test and exercise not only your own ability, but you should prepare your teams for crisis.
Right.
I think that's the biggest takeaway. I'm walking into 2026 now with my organization. We have enjoyed great success, not only with my leadership, but previously. And I think if we look at 2025 and the executive orders and the presidential decisions, a lot of us were not prepared for that.
Yeah.
And I thank God and my opportunity and lived experience that as a former crisis emergency manager, I knew and I had the tools and the competencies. I knew exactly in terms of methodology how we were going to handle this. It was a very different environment, but I wasn't unprepared. So I think 2025 taught me, and every good leader should use either 2025 or just their most recent mini crisis. Test, stress test, train, and support your teams. I think that's absolutely critical. And as I think about your 5 C's, which I love now, you don't go to conferences and really hear people telling you how to prepare and get ready for crisis. You hear the clarity and capacity and communication and all of the things. Crisis is equally, if not more important than all of those, because it's the thing that we know the most. If we look at this present day, we are going from crisis to crisis to crisis. So if you're not testing and preparing and exercising that muscle, you're not going to fare well through it. You're not going to build your resilience muscle. So.
Indeed. No, like, what I see is that most people try to avoid crises. It's like, even the way that I am communicating, I'm realizing that I'm like, okay, the way that I'm hearing those conversations in the previous season, I'm taking it as like, oh, this is how you avoid crisis. But it's like, no, we're not avoiding crisis. We know it's going to happen. But this is what we need to do to make sure that it doesn't get bad.
Dare I say we look forward to it. And not in the way that attitudinally we look forward to it. But if you're a good leader, you don't want your team caught off guard.
Right.
I think of NFL teams. I don't know if the Chiefs prepared to have the end of the season that they did, but I guarantee they had trained, they had plays, they had what if scenarios. If for some reason, the arrangement of plays and teams weren't going well, they don't plan for who gets injured, but I'm sure they have contingency plans if their, main starters get injured and they've got to pivot. So just like you would prepare your IT systems, your physical facilities and spaces, you've got to prepare your teams mentally, emotionally, relationally, and in terms of performance and productivity, you have to prepare them for crisis. I think it's negligent to not do so.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, another question popped in my head. Is there a difference between crisis and conflict?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because as you're speaking, I'm just like, they sound the same, but they're not the same at the same time.
I think they're interchangeable, but I do think every crisis starts with some some type of conflict. And I think conflict, I think what I feel you going is, if you're good about those other C's, and it's almost like what I talked about, you want to have the emergency room. We're good at treatment. We're good at crisis response for children and families. But wouldn't it be great if we could get further upstream before things totally unravel? That's what I think the relationship between conflict and crisis is. People avoid conflict conversations because they're uncomfortable, but they're probably at a state that if I were to lean into my curiosity and my courage, I could probably resolve something before it's a broken relationship, before it's a severed business, So that's at least what I'm thinking. It's kind of the micro test.
It's a starter.
It is. It's
the crisis.
It's your little New Year's Eve fitness, getting back to the gym slowly before you run out and do the marathon. I think if we treat and change the language about conflict, that it's normal, that it's healthy, that it strengthens and stretches teams, it will change our mindset and our framing about that.
Right.
So that way, if we're good about doing conflict over and over, by the time crisis comes, we got this.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the simplest term, it's like conflict good, not too bad.
There you go.
Crisis decent,
yes,
but don't lean too far into it.
Agreed. And I think it's harder to recover from crisis.
Yes.
And I say that just from an infrastructure perspective, having been in New York and saw crisis in all 5 bureaus.
Oh yes.
But little conflicts, that's something that maybe doesn't take time and resources.
It's like sharpen one another.
Yes. That's good.
Interesting. No, thank you for that clarity, because I think
we
been
discovered
wondering.
that together.
Yeah, so sharing that. Credit.
And that's what I love. We always, there's a scripture that talks about iron sharpening iron. And so you challenge my thinking, and even speaking some of these things. I'm going to go back to my team and say, let's pull out our playbook on conflict. I don't think we've touched that as a subject as an executive team for a while.
No, it's becoming such a big topic. Even today, I was doing the intro video, and then my wife wrote the script. She's like a script writer. It was so organized. And I was like, I'm going to freestyle.
That's a good micro conflict.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm going to apologize to her later, but make sure we don't go into crisis, because she put a lot of work into it.
There you go.
But my brain could not just follow like the script, because
But see, what you just did with me right here, this interaction, this discourse, sometimes people just need to hear clearly what doesn't work for you, what you need, why I did what I did. Sometimes we just do these things, and people, through their interpretations, and there's a misunderstanding, and there's miscommunication and misjudgment, because they just don't do this.
Indeed.
Well, this is why I didn't do this. My brain doesn't do. I'm like, with context, I know why. And it deafens the conflict. So good human experiences. Let's talk it out. Clarity is kind. And
clarity is kind.
It is.
Go back to clarity.
That's right.
If it's getting too much, if the crisis
always
is too
start
much.
back with clarity.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, we've gotten to the end of it, and I haven't even looked at my questions yet.
That's a good talk.
I've just been going back and forth. But I do want to know, basically, everything that we've talked about right now. How is your spirit today?
Oh, I knew that was coming. It's my favorite. My spirit is whole. It is whole.
That.
I have seen the Savior for myself, but I've also seen what I call just the secret place. I think one thing you said to me, you said, God is rebuilding you cell by cell. And that I say that almost every day. Oh, okay. And it tells me that when I walk into a mammoth of a meeting or something I'm not prepared for, or something didn't go well, I go back to September 15th. I go back to September 22nd. And I think about the language that you shared. So if I were to parallel that, wholeness to me is, it's okay to pursue healing, but even in conflict, take time to break things apart. Ask more questions. Sit with yourself. Analyze your spirit. Where is this coming from? What am I afraid of? What is this voice telling me? Is this a lie? Is this truth? Sometimes you just need to spend more time with yourself and your spirit. And that's, I think, the process to getting whole.
I love that. Yeah. Wow. That's very beautiful. Now I have a reason to have a shorter, tattoo. Sell by cell.
Now that's yours. I'm not stealing credit. But.
No, I know you talked about doing a book. Whenever you're ready, I'm
telling you,
down,
we should do it together. We should do it together.
I have some ideas, especially all these conversations that I've been having. It's like when I go back and watch them, I'm just like, wow, I said that. They said that. Wow, we've grown.
Good, yeah.
We've grown in real time.
Yeah.
But again, thank you again for being here again, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to find value in this conversation.
It's always my pleasure. You're one
All
of
right.
my favorites.
Likewise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Thank you
good.
so
That was
much.
good.
Uh-huh.